sweet.
Okay.
Is that
Do you like money?
I suppose.
Okay. I love new camera day. What do we have today? We've got the new Nikon Z6 III. So what we're going to do is we're going to unbox this camera, show you what's in the box and what's missing from the box. There's one thing that camera manufacturers are not putting in the box now, which is pretty interesting. We're also going to talk about the specs of this camera, why did I pick up the camera, and what I'm going to use it for, and how we're going to test this guy out. But this is just going to be an unboxing and talking about the specs and what my expectations are and what we need to look for in this camera when we go out and test it. So let's talk about it. All right, let's get this guy unboxed and we'll talk about the specs on it. I'm just going to do a front-forward camera view here. I'm not going to do a top-down on this guy, so we'll just do this real quick. Hopefully this will be a quick video, but you know how my videos go. All right, let's get her open here. See what we got in the box. So we get a USB-C to USB-C cable, really nice. We get the battery. We'll talk about what this battery is in a minute. We get a strap, and this strap, I don't use the straps that come with the camera. I use the Peak Design slide straps because it's really tough. I'm just curious if it says Nikon Z6 III on it. It does not. It just says Nikon on it. Interesting. So usually they say the camera brand, that's not the brand, but the camera make that's on the strap. They didn't on this one. All right, back in there. This will just go and stay in the box. What else we get? We get some type of, yeah, this is just a little housing to put on the side to keep your cables from moving around if you have a bunch of cables plugged in. Again, I don't use these unless it's just a studio-only camera, then I'd use them. All right, so the only thing left in here besides the manuals, has a bunch of manuals, that's it. Only thing left in here is the camera itself. So let's get this guy unboxed out of here, unpackaged. With the bubble wrap. And here is the camera. Put this stuff back in the box so I don't lose it. I'm going to keep this out. I'm going to keep the USB-C to USB out because I use that. Everything else is going back in the box. I keep my boxes for me, and all the stuff that comes with the camera is still in the box. And the reason is if I need to trade it off or sell it, I have everything, including the box, for resale. Just makes the resale value a little bit better to have all the original stuff and the original box. So let's move this to the side here. And let's look what we got here. So now that we unboxed it, there's one thing that I was saying that's missing from these boxes now. I have the battery, but there's no charging brick for these batteries anymore. I noticed Sony's doing that. With my Sony cameras, I had to go buy a charger. But in defense of them, I usually have more than one battery. And so with that being said, I usually go out and buy a charger that will do more than one battery. And I need to review it real quick. It's from Peter Lindgren. It's a battery charger. It doesn't work on the big batteries for like the R3, the R1, the 1DXs, when the R1 comes out, that is, or the Z9, the big batteries. It works for these smaller batteries for the Canon and the Nikon and Sony. And it'll charge 3 batteries at once really, really fast. I'll have to review that pretty soon. Yeah, you don't get a charger with this. So that part is not great, but you can charge it right with the camera. I'm going to put the battery in now so I can turn it on here in a minute. And like I said before, I don't think that's a big deal because I usually go out and buy a charger that does more than one battery, but I need to go buy some more batteries for this. I do have another one for the Z8, but it sits in the Z8. I've got an extra one there. All right, for the camera itself, doesn't feel bad in the hand. It feels pretty good. It is smaller than the Z8 in the hand to feel. But it still has really good girth here to this side, so I like it. The weight's good. I can tell right now that I am taking these straps off that come with the strap buttons on the side. I am taking these off. They are noisy, noisy, noisy. And I don't use them anyway. I put my straps on the lenses. My lenses are all big, so the straps go on my lens, not on the body. And another reason I do that is I don't stress the mount here at all. So if you have a big lens and you're carrying it by the body, there's more weight on the lens than the body, so you get stressed there. So carry it by the lens only. All right, let's look at this guy as far as the button layout goes. Looks pretty good. It looks a lot like the Z8 on its button layout. A couple things are different, but it's pretty much, I can tell right now looking at it, I can set this camera up just like I have the Z8 set up. Looks good. 2 function buttons on the front. So as far as the top, it's cool. It's got the LCD screen. The dial is on the left, which is fine. Let's get that in. So you have to push a button on the top to spin it, so it does lock. So it's not going to spin on its own, or you bump it, it's not going to get bumped. So I'm going to put that in manual now. When I set it up, we'll have a setup video pretty soon too. Like I said, the buttons all look pretty much the same place where I'd expect to see them. The video stills selector here is in the same spot. 1 AF on in the back, the joystick, D-pad down here, menu, zoom, play button. 2 function buttons in the front. Everything else is defined. So yeah, everything's there. So let's go through the specs of this camera real quick. Got it written down over here. So to start with, it's 24.5 megapixel camera. Now, you've heard me talk about 24 megapixels is a bit low, but I only have that caveat by what I'm paying for the camera and what the features in the camera are. You know I own an R8, a Canon R8, 24 megapixels. But I like that camera because it's a good video camera for Canon, and it's a good stills camera. It shoots 40 frames a second, phenomenal eye focus. If you can get your subject large enough in the frame, then 24 megapixels is more than enough. What you have to remember is when you crop in, you're going to start losing resolution. So got to remember that. And that is the only drawback if you need to recomp a lot or you need to crop in when you shoot a lot of smalls. So 24 megapixels, you got to watch for that. What you'll have to do is make sure you get closer to your animal. If you're especially shooting small birds, then 24 may be a bit of a problem for you. But for me, there's features on this. We'll talk about why I picked it up here at the end of the video. But 24 megapixels at this price was okay to deal with. If I'd been paying more than $2,500, because that's what this camera cost, I'd have worried about it. But there's some features in here I really wanted to use. So let's talk about the next thing is on that sensor. 24 megapixels, but it's a partially stacked sensor. What does that mean? Well, if you use a stack sensor, of course a standard sensor, you can get a faster readout speed. So that's where your rolling shutter comes in and readout speed. So with readout speed, what a camera reads in a traditional sensor, not a global, the only global one out there is A9 III. We did a review on that, but every one of them reads from top down. So if you have a really slow shutter speed or sensor readout speed like you do on the A7R5, the Canon R7, things like that are 30, 35 plus, or even the old Z6 II, if you move it real fast, you have a straight line, you're going to get a bow. You're going to get the bit, the pole, or whatever, say it's a pole, you're panning across, it's going to be bowed like that. If you have birds' wings, you'll see them do some weird distortions. If you have a bird high in the frame, you got a reflection of the water low in the frame, and he's coming in, you may have the wings open here and closed here because it's reading from here to the bottom. So that's where the readout speed comes in big time. So a partially stacked sensor, when you get a stacked sensor, you can get like with the Z9 and the Z8, where you get down to that 4 millisecond, which means pretty much almost no rolling shutter. What is the readout speed on this guy? Well, they said it's 3.5 times faster than the Z6 II. So the Z6 II was 39 milliseconds for its sensor readout speed. So if we take 39 divided by 3.5 to see what it is, we get 11.14. That is fantastic. We'll test it to see if it's fantastic. We don't get rolling shutter. But the R8 has almost, the Canon R8 that is, has almost no rolling shutter. It very, very little. Even when you do baseball stuff, you've seen examples where the ball does touch squish. The bats don't bend at all. And I've not seen any rolling shutter for the subjects I shoot so far in the Canon R8, or any warping the screen like I do, or the image like I do with the R7, A7R5, things like that, slower readout speeds. And it's 14 milliseconds, the Canon R8. This is 11.4, even faster. To put it in perspective, I think the R5, yeah. So the R5, Canon R5, which a lot of you guys know that you don't see really rolling shutter, is 15.5. So this one's faster. So this should have no rolling shutter to speak of in wildlife photography. You may find it, but we'll see, and we'll test it out, see what happens. So that's really cool to have this fast readout speed. That's another reason I was really interested in this camera. On top of that, it uses the XB7 processor. That's the brains of this guy. And it's the same one that's in the Z8 and Z9. Same one, which is really nice because they put that processor in there. And with the Z8 and Z9, you've seen we've been able to put a lot of patches on top of that. So the Nikon Z9, when it first came out, I did not like the autofocus. But as they added more and more firmware patches to it, the autofocus for birds on the Z9 and the Z8 is right there with Canon. It blows Sony away. Sorry, Sony guys, but it's true. It is much better than the Sony, and it's right there pretty close on par with the Canon as far as birds go. Now, when you go into animal, that's where it gets a little dicier with the Nikon system. Let's move on from there. The next thing this guy has is on the card slots over here. So yes, these strap locks have to come off, because I can already tell when this was down here like that, and I pushed this door out, it got caught. So I had to move it out of the way. So these strap locks are coming off. Design flaw number one I've seen already in this. But anyway, back to the card slots. You have, just like on the Z8, you have one Type B card, CF Express Type B, and one SD. It'll take up to an SD2. Now, with the Z8, will be the same as this one. If you have both type of cards in there and you're shooting to both cards, you're going to be slowed down to the speed of the SD, so you're going to hit the buffer real quick, which I will not do. I use a 1 terabyte card, which will be more than enough for this guy, gigabytes. But with that being said, the buffer, what I've seen so far on reviews in this guy so far, well, again, we'll test it ourselves to see, to verify these things, because I'm trust but verify. You know, I watch other reviews, and I've watched a ton of my last week or so to look at how this guy performs according to their reviews. And most of them have been non-wildlife guys. I mean, 2 or 3 wildlife guys I've looked at. They didn't have real in-depth, kind of some, but we'll see what we get out of it also. But with that 20 frames a second, shooting this guy in full electronic, you don't hit the buffer. It just goes and goes and goes. I think Steve Perry even got up past 2 minutes, and it still never hit that buffer wall. So that's really good. Pretty much I think you can fill the card up, which is great. You can just, if you need to stay on it, you can stay on it. So it's really, really nice. Now, talk about frames per second this guy will shoot. Full electronic, 20 frames a second. Mechanical, 14 frames a second. So, you know, the Z8 and Z9 don't have mechanical shutters, so why does this guy have a mechanical shutter? Well, it has a mechanical shutter because of flash photography for studio guys, or if anybody's using, you know, strobes or flashes. And if they have those, since the sensor speed is not down to the fast as the Z8, Z9, you need the mechanical to set that rate so you can not get flicker. Like if you maybe got billboards behind a baseball stadium or something like that, or you're in studio with strobes, you have to set that sync rate up to make sure you get a clean picture, not the little lines that'll show up through there, or a TV or something. So that's why we have mechanical shutter in this camera. I'll be shooting full electronic all the time, 20 frames a second. That's where I'll be at. Now let's talk about the LCD screen on this camera. It is a 3.2 inch 2.1 million dot LCD, and it's a flippy screen. Really cool. Same as the Canon and the Sonys. Nikon finally has one. I like it. So if I'm having to shoot myself, because at times this will be in the field when I'm shooting myself and things like that, it's nice I can see that, or I can flip it around, move it around wherever I need to. If I'm shooting low, I can flip that around and look at it. Really nice, really nice. Now, the EVF on this thing, this is what's really cool. The EVF on this is 4,000 nits when you look through the screen. That is crazy. That is iPhone level brightness. When you have your iPhone 15, put it all the way up, that's 4,000 nits. Same as this guy. I think some of the Sonys are only 700 nits. I think even the Z8, Z9, and I think those are only like 2,000 nits, or maybe closer to 3. But this 4,000 is just crazy, crazy, crazy bright. Now I can't see it. The battery's dead in this guy. I was hoping I could turn this on and see if I had anything. I can't. So we'll have to test that out, see how it works. And what I really like about it is a lot of times when I'm outside on some cameras, Z8 and Z9 is pretty good. The R8 is fairly good. The R7 is fairly good. But there is times with the R7 and the R8 where I wish I had a little more brightness when I'm out in bright sun like it is today outside. It's really bright out there. And it's with a brighter screen, you can see through that EVF a lot better. So I'm really curious to check that out. It's going to be really cool. What else we got here? So the battery that we talked about a minute ago, this battery is in EL15C. Pretty common with Nikon. So like I said, I got to get some more of these just so I've got more on hand. So I think these are like 80 bucks a pop. So I'm not real happy about that, but it's got to happen. You got to have it. You got to have extra batteries. Now, I do have the battery grip ordered for this guy. I don't know when it's shipping out. Brian, I was talking to the store when I was picking it up. He said it hadn't shipped and he didn't have a ship date for it. I do know that the Nikon factory is down till after like July 4th. They're shut down right now, so it could be a while if they don't already have them made. So hopefully they'll ship out soon. So when I have that, I'll have 2 batteries in here, and I like a battery grip. This feels good without a battery grip right now, but when you got a big heavy lens on here, having something that gets the rest of your hand, it just feels nicer. I like battery grips with all my cameras. And the EVF has a 120 megahertz refresh rate, which is really nice. So when you're shooting those higher frame rates or video, that 120 megahertz makes it where it's much smoother through there in the playback or what you're seeing through the EVF. And at 20 frames a second, this guy does not have, full electronic, does not have blackout free. But what people have said in the reviews, which we will again have to test out, they don't, since the refresh rate 120 megahertz, they don't see the jitter at all, because it's 20 frames a second. It's fairly natural to the eye, because when you're doing video like you see in movies, a lot of times that's 24 frames a second. So 20 frames a second is pretty close to natural what your brain wants to see, so it works out pretty well. As far as shutter speed, it goes up to 8 thousandths of a second in mechanical and 16 thousandths of a second in electronic. Great, you're going to stop everything with that. Those hummingbirds are not going to stand a chance whatsoever. As far as past the 20 and the 14, this will shoot in electronic mechanical. It will shoot 30 to 60 frames in JPEG only. So if you want to shoot a faster rate, you can only shoot in JPEG. Now it does full resolution of the JPEG, 24 megapixels. If you want to shoot 120 frames a second, which it will do, again, it's in JPEG only, and it's going to be 11 megapixel cropped image. So you got to remember that. You can shoot that if you want to. Me, I probably won't shoot those unless I just really have to get something extremely stopped, which I very seldom need to do. There's times where I wish I had it. That the JPEG, why I don't shoot JPEGs is I can't edit them. I don't have the colors. I don't have the dynamic range that I need that I get out of a RAW. And also when you shoot JPEG, your colors and all that stuff gets baked into the JPEG. So you just can't really do thing much with them. So that's why I shoot RAW, so I have more flexibility to work with that image in post. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about with that frame rate is, when we talk about JPEG, is Precapture. So this camera has, just like the Z8, Z9, has Precapture. But it has one flaw for me for Precapture, and I wish Nikon would change this, because I don't use the Precapture. I know a lot of other wildlife guys don't, because it's in JPEG only. That's what kills it. Canon does it in RAW, but you have to unpack them in a rough way with the Canon R7. It really bites. So I don't use it there either, unless I just really need to. The Sony with the A9 III, they did it right. It's just like a normal shot. You just set the Precapture. If you're holding the shutter halfway down, it's buffering. You can set it to, like, I set it to a third of a second. Then I'm always going to get a third of a second or up to a full second. You always get it every time you pull the shutter. If you're holding it down halfway before you hit the shutter for that amount of time, you get you hit the button to get that. But with Nikon, it's JPEG only. So for me, I'm not going to use the Precapture in these, other than I'll test it for you guys, but I won't use it for myself in what I do. Now, I may use it and go, hey, it looks good. We'll see. We'll see what happens. So now let's get into the autofocus methods of this camera. So from what I see, it has all the same modes as far as the subject detect that the Z8, Z9 have, with one caveat. It doesn't have bird. The bird is supposed to be rolled up into the animals. I've seen some people say, hey, it works great. And I've seen a couple say it doesn't work as good as Z8, Z9. I hope they did roll the machine learning and the AI learning that was in the bird into the animal. But if this ends up being like the Z8, Z9 in animal as far as what tricks birds, it's going to be a little frustrating. So we're going to test that really heavily to see if the Z9 animal and this animal works the same, and is the bird better than the animal, and how much better is it on this Z6 III. So that's one thing I'm really curious to check out as far as this goes, is about that autofocus subject detect. If that animal has enough of that bird rolled into that animal that the birds are easily detectable. I have a feeling it's not, but we'll see. It's why we test these cameras to find out what it'll do. As far as the zones go, it has pretty much most of the zones the Z9 has a one or two more the Z8 does not have. Really interesting. But it's got your custom zones. It's got all your wide and everything. I leave mine in auto wide area on the Z8, Z9. I'll see if I can do it here. I know with prior to the bird on the Z8, Z9, I had to use a large box to get it. And I hope I don't have to do that on this, but we shall see. Now for video. This is one of the reasons I really wanted this camera. On top of it being probably a really good camera, especially if we get the autofocus right, was video. So this guy is the only camera under $4,000 that will shoot 4K 120. My Canons that I shoot a lot that are, below that range, even the R6 Mark II and stuff will only, Sony's, even Sony's, the A7 IV, things like that. But my Canons will only shoot 1080p 120 frames a second. Now the R8 will shoot 1080p 180 frames a second, which is really cool, but it will not shoot 4K 120. Why is that important to me? Well, with 4K, if I need to crop in at all, then I lose resolution when I start cropping in. So that is one of the big reasons I really wanted this camera from in the field work when I'm doing the stills and video for the wildlife, for all those type of things. So you can have a better picture that you guys get out of there as I'm shooting out in the field. Now let's talk about all the resolutions of video this guy will shoot on top of that one I was talking about, 4K 120, why I bought it. So it'll shoot 6K up to 60 frames a second, which is really cool. Oh, and then you can shoot 4K up to 60 frames a second in full resolution. You can shoot the 4K 120 we talked about a minute ago. Now you get a 1.5 crop. Not a biggie with me. 1.5 crop's fine. I just need to probably back up a little bit more. But in video, the crop on a low sensor doesn't bother me. In stills, it will bother me. If it's 1.5 crop in stills 24, it'd be rough. It will shoot 1080p at 240 frames a second. That's cool. So you can really slow that thing down, which would be really awesome. It does have a 10% crop on it also, so remember that. That is the video modes this guy shoot, which is really nice. That's one of the big reasons I wanted this guy, was for the video on top of the stills. As for a second camera, that 4K 120 is going to be nice in the field when I'm shooting this, as opposed to the Z9 or Z8. First, image stabilization. The body has 8 stops of image stabilization. What it also does is, whatever you're focused on, like right now this is focused on my eye, what the screen showed me over there, it will center that vibration reduction, the IS, on my eye in that spot. It'll try to center that stabilization here as opposed to the whole screen. So that's supposed to be a little bit better. Again, we'll test it out, just see in video how that works out. That's pretty much it for this camera as far as what it has in it and what we're going to look for, what we're going to test. We're going to run this through the ringer. We're going to run it to the ringer as far as the capabilities of it, the setup of it, the lenses it'll pair with, like the 180-600, the 400-2.8, my Fringer adapter with the Canon lenses. I think we're going to review the 28-400. I found a copy of that too, so we'll test that on here too to see what kind of budget setup we can get for wildlife for Nikon. So we'll look at that. And like I said, the reasons I got this camera, why did I get it? Great hybrid camera. I think it's going to be a phenomenal hybrid camera. Testing, we'll find out. But the video capabilities on this guy is top notch. The stills and the autofocus is going to look like it's going to be top notch. The colors that come out of this for stills, more than likely we'll see if they're like the Z8, Z9. It's going to be phenomenal. I love the color profiles that Nikon uses. It really suits how I shoot. And then it's a great complementary camera to the Z9. It may even be that I may dump the Z8. I don't know. We'll see. If this does what I hope it does, I probably don't need the Z8. The drawback of the Z8 to me is the battery life on that Z8. I'm really curious on the battery life on this guy, if it works better. That Z8 just draws a lot of power and has the same size battery this has, so it really drains fast. So I always have to have another battery on hand. I don't have a grip for the Z8. But if this handles, that'd be really nice to say I could dump the Z8 for my second camera off the Z9. But that's the reasons I picked this guy up, and we're going to do a lot more reviews of this guy. So we'll see what it does here pretty soon. So expect a lot more videos on this camera and some Nikon lenses. Don't worry, Canon guys. I'll get videos for you too on the R7-2800 very, very soon. But until we meet again, guys, get outside and go run that shutter.